Welcome to another episode of Sunrise Life, the podcast where we have deep conversations with fellow freelance models. Today, I have Bella on the other line, and we've been chatting for a while. She's in Hawaii. I'm really excited to finally meet her sometime in the next week when I go there. Bella, how's it going?
Hello, super excited to be on. And yes, I was just thinking about how fun it is that we get to do this interview and then honestly in a week we get to meet in real life also.
Yeah, I love following other people on the internet and then finally meeting them in person. And then by the time I meet them, I feel like I've already met them in person a long time ago because of how
Yep.
long I've seen them online.
That is one of my I think one of the biggest benefits of social media is being able to make friends that just online friends, internet friends, and feel close to them. Or in the same thing, being able to keep up with your current friends, and even if you don't catch up all the time, you know what they're doing.
Yeah. And you're out there in Hawaii. You live in Hawaii?
Yes, yeah, I just had my 1 year actually, and I'm on the Big Island. I came out here for nature and to slow down, and I just really wanted to be immersed in this kind of lifestyle, and I absolutely love it. It's very much, I can't say forever on anything because I never know what the future is going to bring, but currently this is going to be very, very long term home for sure.
That's awesome. And you're loving it, obviously. So where were you before?
I was in Kansas City, Missouri for 5 years before, actually. I had lived there. So I graduated from college in May 2016 and moved to Kansas City, Missouri from there. And the last 3 years, I traveled full time because people always ask me, what's in Missouri? What's in the Midwest? Cheap cost of living.
Yeah.
It is ridiculously cheap to live there. So I was able to travel full time and still have a home base where, if I was not home for 2 to 3 weeks a month, it wasn't that crazy because my bills at home weren't super high. But I eventually, as COVID lockdown did with everybody, everybody went through it, rediscovered different things about themselves. And something I discovered was just that as much as I loved the place that I was in and the community and everything that I had created there, I was still missing something. And essentially, that something was nature. And so that's how I ended up finding Big Island and deciding on out here because I really, really wanted lots of nature.
That's awesome. I love the Big Island. I've been there a few times too, and I think it's my favorite because it seems to be the most secluded.
It is, yeah. It's so I'm not like an overly numbers person, but numbers really help me gauge things, understand them. And so before I moved here, I looked at a bunch of numbers, and Oahu, which is where Honolulu is 592 square miles, and there's 980,000 people that live there. Big Island is 15,000 square miles, and 186,000 people live here.
Oh, wow.
So it's yeah, right? Those numbers really give you a bet. You're like, oh, holy crap. So yeah, Big Island is just it's the country.
That's amazing. Well, for our audience and for me, I guess, because I don't know the answer to this question either, can you tell a little introduction about how you got into freelance modeling and how your modeling career has progressed until now?
Yes, I actually almost I had to stop myself from going into the whole spiel because I almost already told that when I was talking about moving to Kansas City. I got started modeling through college, actually. I got my degree in fashion marketing and management. So I went to a school with a very large fashion program. And through there, I actually, it's one of my favorite stories because I'm still really good friends with this girl. But my freshman year, my friend Kirsten, she was a film major, and basically, first couple of weeks of school, she had an assignment in her photography class where they just had to learn the basics of the camera. The assignment was take portraits of somebody just so that they could learn, manual focus and auto and just the basics. And so she asked me to pose for her. She was like, can I take portraits of you? was like, sure, I don't like, what do I do? What is this? And so we did this little portrait photo shoot. And even from that first one, I found I had like just a natural comfortability in front of the camera and like moving around and, doing different things. And so over the next 4 years at school, I ended up, like by my senior year, I ended up being one of the main on campus models because there were always lots of projects where you needed models, and being college students, you're broke. So you're going to use, your fellow students.
Yeah.
And so I got like this awesome, like 4 years of really great practice and a safe space to hone that skill without any pressure because we were all students and we were all learning, and we're all coming up together and supporting each other. And the summer between my junior and senior year, so summer 2015, I had an internship in Chicago and I lived there for the summer, and I started doing photo shoots outside of school projects. And at that time, Instagram was kind of, it was starting to become what it is now, where, in 2012, when it first started, or 2010, whenever that was, it used to be just, like really bad pictures of your food and like remember outfit of the day posts.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so that summer I started connecting with other people on Instagram because I was like posting my modeling photos from student projects and started doing photo shoots, outside of college. And then I graduated May 2016. Oh yeah, that was when I moved to Kansas City. And at that point, I definitely didn't really, people would say like, oh, you're a model. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, I do modeling. So I wasn't like considering doing it. It was just something I enjoyed. And I moved to Kansas City and had a job as an assistant buyer and an assistant manager at a local boutique. And I continued modeling on the side. And I was there for a year and a half. And then I got a job in an office. It was like a major, basically at 25, I was doing, quote unquote, what you're supposed to do. I was working in an office in my field, 401k, salary, benefits, all that stuff. And I worked there for a year, and my mental health just took a deep, deep dive. And it was a great company that I worked for, but it was just not for me. Like that was just not my environment. And I was still modeling on the side, and I was growing, 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 growing. But now that I had this job, I was having to stop, like I was having to turn down opportunities because I had to be, in the office 40 plus hours a week.
Oh.
And yeah, and so after that year there, I decided, I was like, I do not want to look back on my life and wonder what if. I have the rest of my life to sit in an office. I want to try modeling full time. And if it doesn't work out, then I can go back into my field. I know, and it can just be a part time for fun thing. But I don't want to look back and wonder, what if? What if I had tried modeling full time? No. So I was like, I got to just try. If I trip, fall, and fail, I can pick myself back up, and then at least, we'll move forward. But
That's
that
awesome.
was like 3.5 years ago, and here I am still modeling full time. So I'm so grateful that I took that jump.
That's really amazing. So now you're in Hawaii, and are you doing trips outside of Hawaii for modeling, or do people mostly come to you right now?
So it's a little bit of a mix, but people are mainly coming here. So after I left that job, I traveled full time for 3 years, where I had kind of mentioned it before. I was home in Kansas City, maybe not two, I was gone about 2 to 3 weeks every month, traveling full time, just going all over. I know you obviously know all about that, being on the road full time. And it was COVID where, we sat still. I was like, man, if I'm going to sit still and not be able to travel, I want to be in a place that I feel that, and I don't want to go anywhere. And so that's how I chose out here. And I definitely still, like, I'm going to LA in a few weeks for work. And I just went to Mexico last month to work with Met Art. So I do still travel, but now it's like every other month rather than a couple of weeks every month.
That's cool.
So yeah, people come out here, whether it's people coming out to work with me specifically just for that reason, or a lot of times I also work with people who, like, they're coming to Hawaii for a vacation anyway, and they're like, well, while I'm here, I also want to create. So that's also another big one that I work with.
That's really cool. And so to find people that are like coming to Hawaii and they're on a vacation and they want to do a photo shoot, like how do you reach that niche audience?
So of course, the online platforms are always super helpful. I usually post on Instagram, Twitter. Model Mayhem and Model Society are good ones also that I post. I still do get, like, I just have a permanent posting on Model Mayhem, I think, about how I offer, day tours out here. That way, when people are looking for models, when they're planning on coming out here, I pop up and they see me. And then also over the course of, especially modeling full time for 3 years, but essentially modeling for 10 years, I've built an email list. And so I'll also just send out a little email blast of, hey, come in here. These are the dates.
That's cool. And you have a benefit that you know locations to take photographers to, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yeah. That's part of what I offer is it's modeling. And then I have a variety of locations that I can take people to. And one of the things that I have really made sure to do out here is make sure that, especially with Hawaii being more or less illegally occupied, there are a lot of locations out here that are still very, very sacred to the people. And so I kind of make sure that the locations we're going to are, good to go to, and we're not going to be disrespecting anybody by shooting there because it's a sacred place, which the whole place is sacred. But, there are some places that are more than others.
I see. That's cool. That is really cool. I've discovered in the last couple of years that it's become apparent with freelance modeling, it's so competitive that people are more likely to book the model that knows a location to bring you to than to hire a model and then have to figure out the location on themselves. We have to be like the location guide and the makeup artist and the wardrobe stylist and all of that.
Oh my gosh, truly. Yeah, that's something I'm constantly telling people is I'm like, it is not just modeling, like, because they want all these extra things, but they want it, yeah, combined into one package. They don't want to have to do all these extra steps. And especially with a place like this, it is hard to, like, it's not really an easy scouting location. Like, like, oh, I can just take a weekend trip here, find locations, and then come back for the actual photo shoots. So having somebody who knows locations is like major big. I also offer transportation too because, some people come, like, they'll be on Oahu for vacation and they'll just come for the day. So with, like, the one package deal, I'll pick them up from the airport, pop them around to anywhere from 2 to 4 locations depending on what's going on, and then drop them back off at the airport. And so I just have like a package that includes gas and modeling fee and location. It's just like all wrapped in one.
That's awesome. I'm going to rewind a little bit because I had other questions about your college and everything. You went to college and then you got a job after college, and you decided that you were unhappy in that job and you wanted to pursue full-time freelance modeling. And that all happened. You started the full time 3.5 years ago, you said, like just before.
Yeah, just about.
So after you had finished college and were getting into like preparing to become full time, like had you already been doing like artistic nude type stuff?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I did my first artistic nude photo shoot the summer after I graduated from college. There were, so the school I went to, it was like a liberal arts college, but on the scale of liberal, it was more conservative. Definitely still liberal, but like on the conservative end of liberal. So those projects never had anything like really nudity involved. But after I graduated, I had a friend actually in Kansas City who he had been doing like really cool, experimental looking nude film photography. And that was the first time for me that I had ever really seen that as a thing. Like I was fascinated by it. I thought it was so beautiful. I was like, hey, I would love to do a nude shoot. Like that just, I just really liked how it all looked and I wanted to do it. He was like, absolutely. So we got together and did that shoot. And I had what I often refer to as my come to Jesus moment, but with nudity in nature. Like we were outside and I was naked and I just like hugged this tree naked. And the way I felt, I was like, yo, everybody needs to do this. This is incredible. Like it feels so good. It feels so natural and grounding. I just fell in love. But so that was actually that wasn't in Kansas City, but it was in Missouri. And then a few months later, I moved to Kansas City. And by that point, I had posted a couple of those photos on Instagram. Back when, like, they really did appreciate as long as you censored it, it was fine.
Yeah.
And so I had posted those because I loved them and they were beautiful. And immediately, I had a huge response from people in Kansas City wanting to book me for that because they were like, hey, I've always wanted to do some kind of, nude art shoot. But at the time, 6 years ago, there were not really any openly nude models in Kansas City. Like there might be some people who'd be okay doing it, but they wouldn't want you to post it anywhere. And so I just like, because I had posted it on Instagram and was, actively proud of it, I had a lot of people reaching out wanting to book for that, which was awesome. And so that was the next 2.5 years, me growing and modeling, having the opportunity to continue to travel and grow this business that I had never like even considered as a thing. And so eventually it did get to a place where I was like, I'm getting enough work that I think I could do this full time. And the nude in nature is like, I think my personal favorite thing to model just because, like I said, it's like my little come to Jesus moment. I have so many photos of me hugging trees naked now because I just can't. I'm always like, hugging this tree.
Sweet. Did you have any pushback from friends or family when you made that transition?
Thankfully, I've been very lucky and grateful that at least to my face, everybody's always been supportive because I've always gone about it very unapologetically. Like, this is who I am, this is what you do. If it's an issue, let's just not interact with each other, Because I'm not going to change the way I live and what makes me happy because I'm not doing anything that hurts anybody. I did have a really funny conversation with my mom, though, whenever I first started getting more into it. She was like, you know, and I'm endlessly grateful for my mother. She really, truly shows unconditional love because even when she doesn't understand it, she, wants to support. And so she was like, as your mother, I do wish you were more clothed. But what you're doing is very beautiful. And as long as you're safe and happy, that's all that matters to me. It's like, aw, it's like, I love you, Mom.
Yeah, my
And
mom's similar also to that.
yes, yeah, I love when I see because I know, unfortunately, from conversations with other models, I know how, sometimes potentially rare it is for your family to be that supportive and to be able to have that. So I love seeing, like when you were posting about your mom and your sister, when you guys got when you and your sister got your hair done. And I love seeing those, like families who are supportive and loving. It doesn't change. Like, what? We're naked for a living. Like, why wouldn't you be supportive?
Yeah. My dad's not as supportive. He's
Oh, yeah.
been better with me lately, but the first 10 years of my modeling, or maybe even a little more, he was like definitely trying to pressure me into getting some kind of an office job.
Yeah. I know whenever I transitioned from office to modeling full time, my mom, again, supportive, but she just wanted to make sure, she was like, I just want to make sure you're going to be taken care of and that, like, you're going to get enough work, because she was just worried about bills and money and that.
Mm-hmm.
But the longer, especially after the first year of doing it, and like I never had to borrow money from her, like I was able to pay my bills, I was fine. The questions went from like, are you doing okay? How is it going? Like checking in to make sure that it's working, to now when I talk to my mom, she's like, so where have you been? What shoots have you done? Where, like, like she sees that it is legitimate and viable and I can take care of myself with this being my job. So she's here for it.
That's cool. Have you had to explain to her like how your safety process goes and all that?
I have, yeah, because that's usually one of her concerns. And my mom doesn't have an iPhone, so I have my location permanently on with like my sister and one of my partners and a couple of my best friends. And my mom has all those people's numbers. That way, if for, like little things like that. And then, yeah, I have gone over with her, like when someone reaches out, what I do to make sure that, they're a good potential option to actually work with and not just a random stranger that I'm meeting up with, and like going through all of that. That way she knows, yeah, I'm doing my best to be safe.
That's cool. With that being said, I'd like to ask, have you had any nightmare photo shoots? I call this part of my podcast the photo shoot fail of the week. If there's anything in your mind that you recall specifically a photographer who was either out of line or just something weird that happened during the shoot, like what's one of your crazy stories?
Yeah, thankfully I don't have anything super crazy. I did immediately think of one though, where honestly I look back and I realize I could have probably seen that it was going to be weird, but I was tired and not, I was maybe my first year into it, so I didn't realize. But one time I had this guy reach out for a photo shoot. He just wanted to do an hour of nude, which was fine. And we were going to be shooting at a house, fine, nothing like out of the ordinary. But then he was talking about how he was like trying to get me to like meet him at a gas station to park the car there and then come to the house, because he was house sitting for his friend. Like that should have been my warning sign that this was weird. But I told him, I was like, no, I'm not leaving my car somewhere. Like I can park it in the driveway. If there's not supposed to be an extra car, I can park around the corner, but like I'm definitely not just leaving my car somewhere and having you take me to another location.
Yeah.
Like, no. And so I get there and it's fine. But basically, we do this 1 hour photo shoot in this like bedroom. And very quickly, I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude. And it's fine if you're a photographer and you're doing it for fun because you like it and it's for you. But I was like, this dude is literally just taking photos for himself. I was like, there's no, I'm never going to see these photos again. Like, and we had to make, like, it was a small room and we shot in there for an hour, and he was like, what else should we do? What else should we do? I was like, bro, we've worked all four corners. I don't know what you want from me. Like, and so it was just weird energy, but he didn't try anything weird. He did make a couple of like inappropriate comments, but nothing wild. Like one time he was like, your ass looks great like that. And I just didn't respond, because for me, if, it's a good thing if the point of the shoot is to be sexy, there's nothing wrong with being like, oh, that looks great. But there's a way to, instead of like, oh, your ass looks great like that, you could just say, that's a great pose.
Yeah.
That looks awesome. That looks hot. Like there's a way to communicate the same thing without being your ass looks great. But it was just an hour, thankfully. Man, it's probably one of the longest hours of my life because I was just like, but it was ultimately fine. It was just like awkward as hell.
Yeah, so that reminds me of like the first 8 years of my traveling model.
Yeah.
That was mostly, it was like 80% that for me. My tolerance level for weirdos was so high, and now that I'm 35, like I won't even reply to those types of photographers because I cringe at it. But back then I was just trying to save up a bunch of money and all this. So
Yep. Absolutely. And that's why I was like, I've definitely had shoots like that before where I can tell, like, they just enjoy talking to a pretty naked young woman. Like, that's fine. This one was just like an extra step of like cringe, like you said. And yeah, eventually you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I'm good on that now. Like,
yeah.
I just can't even, yeah, it takes a little too much out.
Yeah. My criteria for whether or not I would shoot for somebody for a long time when I started traveling was, oh, I don't think you're a serial killer, so it's gonna be fine, and I could probably fight you if I. And now I'm like, I feel like there's a responsibility to like not work with people who are shady, but I think it's good that if that's like the weirdest situation that you had, I think that I'd say you've had a pretty positive experience with your freelance modeling.
I definitely agree because yeah, the horror stories. I listened to the first 4 episodes on here, and yeah, like some of the horror stories people have, I've definitely had close calls where at some point in the messages, like setting up the photo shoot, I end up getting like this gut feeling, or they say something that just is a little too off for me, and so I end up not doing the photo shoot. And I feel like those are possibilities of times that if I had gone, it might have been worse or weirder, but thankfully I trusted my gut, which is not always, like, because there are also times where, you're messaging a photographer and I'm like, they seem a little off. And then I meet them. I'm like, oh, you just don't have the best social skills.
Yeah.
Like, like you're totally safe, totally respectable. You just don't have the best social skills. So it's hard to figure out what is that and what is, actual weirdness.
Yeah, I understand that fully. I've definitely worked with people who maybe they had Asperger's or something.
Yeah.
They're just
Mhm.
super awkward over like internet communication, and then you show up and they're like, oh, they're just really socially awkward, which is fine. But it might be pulling red flags because you're like, wait, why did he say that?
Yes, exactly. And so I just obviously intuition isn't always, like you can misread things, but I usually trust my intuition and my gut. And so if at some point during messages my gut's like, I don't know if you should do this. I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter if I need the money or not. I'm not going to do it because that just got to trust the intuition.
That's really good that you've got that. Do you feel that while you were modeling for people in college, you kind of got used to, like, were people DMing you to set up shoots online, or was it mostly like in person? Like, how did you sharpen that spider sense for figuring out who's a creep and who's not?
So I think part of it, because in college, I almost exclusively did photo shoots with just other students. And it wasn't until, yeah, the last year that I started doing stuff outside, and it was all through Instagram. But I honestly think what it comes from is I went to an all women's college,
Oh,
and the way my bullshit meter, like, I can't, I have a very low tolerance for bullshit anymore after going to an all women's college. And trust me, bullshit comes from everybody, but specifically men's bullshit.
yeah.
And I feel like that intuition came from there where even like just a little comment will be made and I'll be like, nope, that wasn't cool. Like we're not doing that anymore. So, and then but also experience and talking to other people and it's like, gathering different experiences and taking those and thinking about how they apply to what's going on now. But ultimately, I'm just very grateful that my intuition has come in so much, because I don't know exactly how it got to be like that. I feel like the women's college was a lot of it.
That's great. Yeah, I definitely did not have that experience. I did a little bit of internet college after I dropped out of high school, but I was never part of any kind of a school community.
Yeah.
So my social skills were kind of like, oh, I think I can survive this, so I'm going to try it type of
Yeah. You're a tough cookie.
Well, I'm still alive, so that's good, but
Yep. But it
nowadays I
also,
do a lot of self-shooting, and then my boyfriend shoots me, and I do
mm-hmm.
like some destination type trips, but a lot of my income also comes from like Patreon and OnlyFans.
Yes, which those have been amazing. Like, it is super nice not having to say yes to every photo shoot that gets asked now. Like you said, of like when you first got started and you were just, because when I first went full-time modeling, yeah, I did a lot more of those kind of shoots also, because it's what pays and that's what a lot of people are asking for. And you're like, well, I need to pay my bills. Like, okay. And so those online platforms are so essential now, because you don't have to say yes to everything, because you have that other little piece of income.
Yeah, that's awesome. When I see your photos online, I definitely get the vibe of the outdoor nude and nature vibe. But are there a lot of shoots that you do where people want to photograph you in different genres that you're not super stoked about, but do you curate your image, or do you mostly just take on gigs that are like the type of photography that you would like to be featured as?
So I definitely do some shoots that are, yeah, they want me to wear something specific that isn't maybe, yeah, my brand or my look, but I'll still do it. But thankfully, I mean, after all this time, most of the people who approach me are looking for that image I've curated so well of this, nature, fairy, goddess, nymph, light, airy, beautiful, blending with nature. But I definitely do have, sometimes they'll bring little outfits along, and I there's nothing, there's never anything wrong with it. But like the kind of cheesy glamour, little
Schoolgirl
tiny,
costume.
yes, yeah, like those, not really for me, but I'll do it because I don't really mind. Like, and if there ever was something that I wasn't comfortable with, I'll say no. Like one time, someone, a photographer, asked if I'd be comfortable holding like a gun or something, and it was unloaded and everything. But personally, I was like, honestly, that is something I wouldn't be interested in. Like, thanks for asking. Um, but for the most part, those other kinds I'm usually open to. It is funny that I get a lot of people asking to take my portraits, because my eyes are very expressive and bright, and they're green. They're like hazel green. And so it's always funny where sometimes I get booked for a nude shoot. And they're like, "Hey, do you mind if I just take photos of your face for a second?" I'm like, what? Yeah, sure.
That's cool. Yeah, the gun thing. Interestingly, like throughout the course of my career, a lot of people have wanted me to pose with guns, and for the most part, like I wasn't very like politically aware until about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So I didn't mind posing with guns at all. And now sometimes when I had those photos up, people would make like weird comments about them, or like tell me that I'm not showing gun safety with the way that I was posing with it, or whatever. Like people just want to criticize anything that looks
Yeah.
like we can start an argument about something in the comments. So now I don't like initiate that style. I'm not going to say that I would never do it again, but I would definitely say it's not really like my thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that, yeah, with like touchy subjects, I kind of do it per request. Like I did a photo shoot where I did traditional Indian garments, and I had a bindi and traditional makeup and everything. I was I was comfortable doing that because the photographer and his wife were from India, and that was what they wanted to do. That they wanted me to wear the clothes. They dressed me up. So I was like, okay, this isn't me. Like, like I was like, this feels appropriate versus if somebody was like, oh, just throw this bindi on and throw this sari on just because, like, oh, it looks cool and it's fun. I'm like, yeah, but this is a whole culture. And so, yeah, kind of like with guns, where there could be an opportunity where it's like, you feel good and comfortable with it. But the ones where it's just more as like an afterthought,
Yeah.
where I'm like, well, like there could be more thought in this.
There's a company in Seattle called Weapon Outfitters that they make calendars and posters, and they like represent like companies for like gun straps and like bullet belts and stuff. And I've modeled for them a few times because like it's more like I'm doing a catalog shoot. It's not like
Yeah,
some guy with a bunch of guns in his basement wants to show them off to, like a naked chick or something like that.
yeah, exactly. And that is, yeah, when it's like more, uh, yeah, like you said, catalog commercial.
Yeah, still not everybody's cup of tea. I can totally see that though.
Yeah. Ooh, I just thought, oh, okay, this wasn't a horror photo shoot, but
Mhm.
I'm also going to like reverse a little bit because I just thought of a good story.
Okay, yeah, tell me.
So one time I was in Kansas City and I had a photo shoot set up, and usually the day before the photo shoot, like the night before, I'll text the photographer just confirming that the next day we're still on. And if we haven't talked about specifics of what I should bring, like I always bring a large assortment. You bring 2 dozen, if not more, options, whole duffel bag. But I like to try and curate, because I have a lot of options. So I asked, like, oh, is there anything I should bring? Text this photographer. He was like, yeah, black lingerie, this, that, and any cool, like, rainbow or sparkly or glow in the dark dildos or vibrators you have.
What?
Yes, yeah. I went, what? And I went back through our messages on Model Mayhem where we were first messaging, because I was like, I don't remember talking about this at all, because I don't do that kind of modeling for other people. Like I will do it like for like, yeah, if I'm feeling sexy and I want to express myself that way on my platforms, I'll do it. Or, sometimes I work with Met Art and Sig models, but they don't use toys either. So I just was like, where did this come from? I look back at our messages. We booked for art nude is what it said.
Mm-hmm.
So I told him, I was like, excuse me, why do you think we're doing that? Like, that's kind of inappropriate. And basically in the conversation, he got very defensive, of course. And he was like, well, I subscribed to your OnlyFans and saw you use something on there. And I was like, excuse so you're assuming because you saw it on my private site that I would do that for you? And I, again, like, I bitched about it to my roommate at the time. That way I could come to him and be professional, because but I had to get it out. I was like, what in the hell? And I told him, I was like, that is an incredibly wrong assumption. You can't just like, I know you're bringing it up now, but you're not even bringing it up. You didn't ask. You just assumed that I'd be okay with that. And I'm not. And I was like, I'm canceling the photo shoot because I no longer feel comfortable. Because
Yeah.
even if I do come and I said no, I feel like you're gonna possibly try and pressure, especially because his attitude wasn't, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You're right. That was an assumption. Sorry. He was like, no, you do it elsewhere. So why wouldn't you do it for me? I was
Oh,
like, yeah,
right on.
I was like, we're not shooting.
Did you already know that he was on your OnlyFans, or did he expose that to you during that conversation?
No, he exposed it in that conversation.
That is so awkward, and I've heard of that sort of a thing happening with other models too, because they have their own OnlyFans where they make different types of content that they're comfortable in their own privacy in their own home creating.
Yes.
And photographers join their OnlyFans thinking, oh, she'll do that for anybody.
Right? And it's like, excuse me, this is why are you assuming that without even asking? And it's always really weird when, it doesn't happen a lot, but every once in a while I'll get like a photographer on, like somebody will message me on OnlyFans asking to book me for a photo shoot. And I'm like, this is not an appropriate place for that conversation.
Yeah.
I was like, if you want to book me, I have a website, I have an Instagram, like I have all these other things. you asking me here, like, this is not the place for that.
Yeah. And I don't know what the best way to advertise that what you do on OnlyFans isn't like on the menu for a shoot, but
Yeah.
there's got to be a good way to like include that. Some photographers won't shoot anybody at all if they see that they have an OnlyFans or a Patreon or whatever, because they're gonna assume that you're gonna steal their photos and make money off of it or something.
Yeah, or which I think is crazy because I completely understand, asking and being like, hey, can you not post these anywhere because I'm paying you, like having that be in contract, but to just like write it off completely.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
I think there's a lot of misogyny with people who do have an OnlyFans. People, they don't want to associate. You're on Reddit, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so you experienced getting kicked out of groups where they're like, "Oh, we just found out that you have an OnlyFans and we don't allow your kind here."
Yep, because I'm like, okay, you're asking for free content and you're kicking out the people who make this content the most. Like, I've never I understand not allowing advertising. Like, your title in this thing shouldn't be "Come to my OnlyFans for more."
Right.
But the fact that they just like, if you have an OnlyFans at all, they'll block you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've always thought that was weird.
I've been like regular contributors and like posting like relevant content that people loved, and then after like a few weeks, found out that I got booted, and yeah, so it is kind of annoying. It's like I'm not going to take my OnlyFans link out of my bio,
Yeah.
but sometimes I'm tempted to because I do want to be part of other communities on Reddit, but it's not worth conforming.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Where it does get frustrating. You're like, okay, well, whatever.
I want to ask you something about your life. This is a segment of the podcast that I call the Rising Phoenix moment. Is there a situation in your life that, whether it's related to your modeling or not, that you had to be faced with a challenge that you overcame?
So, actually, kind of related to what we're talking about with OnlyFans and getting judgment just from the association on that with name, which doesn't matter. Even if you do full on work on OnlyFans, I don't think there should be any judgment, period. But overcoming people, like, you can just almost see people's like their thought process or their brain kind of change when you mention that you have an OnlyFans, because they're like, oh, you know? And so I love like meeting people, having them get to know me and like charming the pants off of them. And then they find out I have an OnlyFans, and you can see that like they almost like their instinct reaction is like judgment, but they're like, wait, but I like her and she's cool. And so it like challenges their thought process. And I always hope that they rethink the way they think about it in general if they ever meet anyone else who does it, because it's, it's not it's not crazy. And so just overcoming that, constant judgment from other people, or even just from nude modeling in general. One of the things I was most proud of in Kansas City was, after living there for 5 years, like I had mentioned before, when I first moved there, there was almost no nude modeling scene. And when I moved out of Kansas City to Hawaii a year ago, there's absolutely a nude modeling scene there. There are tons of people who do it now and are comfortable. And some of my favorite conversations to have with people would be, they'd be like, Bella, I didn't really understand nude modeling before. I never really got, people trying to like, they just say like they didn't understand it before, but then they saw what I did and saw the message that I was promoting, and they're like, and I get it now, or they at least understand it more.
That's cool. And it's not necessarily all this like salacious, disgusting, erotic thing all the time. It can just be like an artful creation.
Yeah. And yeah, and that it nudity, because one of my biggest things is showing that nudity is not synonymous with sex. And for a long time, I actually was I was very adamant about not doing anything even remotely sexual because I was trying so hard. Simple minds need simple messages. And so at the time, I was so focused on not doing anything that could be perceived as sexual because I really wanted to get into people's brains that nudity is not synonymous with sex. But then I started realizing, I was like, but nudity also is a part of sex, and it's okay. And it's okay to also embrace your sexuality while also having the duality of every time you're naked, it doesn't have to be sexual. And so I kind of like my little tagline: normalizing nudity, embracing sexuality.
I love that.
Like, get both in there because there is nothing wrong with nudity being sexy and sexual, but that doesn't mean it's exclusively that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I fully agree with that. There's a lot of self-proclaimed artistic photographers that when you're talking about their style of photography, they're so adamant that it's not sexual at all and it's not pornographic at all because that's evil somehow, or it
Yeah.
negates the artistic value of it.
Yeah, and that's absolutely not true. And I say that having come from for a little while being of that mindset and then eventually updating and realizing wait, no, they can all coexist.
Yeah, just because there's eye contact, it doesn't mean it's not an artistic photo. I've had some
Yes.
people say that if there's eye contact, that makes it pornographic.
What?
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, people have some weird definitions on what is tasteful and what is artistic, and then what's like crossing the line.
Yeah, that's always interesting. Or I've had this conversation with people on Reddit before. I really not got into it, but and again, I always when I'm writing things out online, I always want to make sure that if it's screenshot and posted elsewhere, I come out like even if I want to curse someone out, I won't. So I'm like, I want to remain the level-headed person.
Yeah.
But I had a conversation with someone once where he was saying that, oh, what was it exactly? Because I was saying, nudity is not inherently sexual. And he was saying something like that's an opinion. And I was like, no, no, no. The opinion is finding something sexy. The opinion isn't nudity is sexual. So the example I used was if I'm sitting here drinking tea and I'm naked, that is not sexual. Me just sitting here drinking tea naked is not a sexual thing. Because I'm naked does not make it a sexual act. But you are allowed to find it sexy. That's the opinion. You finding it sexy is each person's personal opinion. There's nothing wrong with finding it sexy, but that does not make what I'm doing sexual. Like that distinction of it doesn't make it inherently sexual, but that doesn't mean it can't be found sexy or sexual, but it doesn't make it so.
I fully agree. That's a good point. And everything is also a fetish to somebody, like sneezing. Not sexy to 99.9% of people, but to that 0.01% that has a sneezing fetish, it's sexy.
Yeah. Yes.
You can't live in the world without somebody having a thing for whatever you're doing at any given time.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always a niche.
So yeah, with that being said, exactly, like just because we use the sneezing example, just because you sneeze doesn't mean you're making porn or like trying to turn people on, because some people are going to think that that's hot and other people are not going to be phased at all by it. With artistic
Yeah.
nudity, I think people who are used to looking at like artistic nude photos or creating them or whatever, like it's not necessarily turning them on. But to people who like maybe live in an area where their culture is like not allowed to look at nudity because it's illegal, because it's porn or whatever, like, and then they see one like, oh my god, nipples. You know, if it's not
Yes.
allowed, it makes people want to obsess over it.
Mm-hmm. Fully. And that actually, I am constantly talking about how exposure works. I'm like, if you see nipples, you stop realizing you're looking at nipples. like so constantly. The way, I mean, I know you'll relate to this of like the way I'll be in a coffee shop, like just looking at somebody's portfolio because they reached out and going over their work. And I have a moment where I look around and I realize I'm like, oh, I'm like staring at labia in this coffee shop, not even realizing it because
Yeah.
it doesn't even phase me anymore because I've seen it so much and I'm looking at it in a professional way. Like, and so truly, like if people were just exposed to nipples more, you would not think twice about seeing a pair of nipples in a normal situation. And
Yeah.
not to say you might not still find it sexy, but it no longer becomes, like you said, this huge thing that you're like, oh my gosh, nipples.
That's funny. When you're looking at a photographer's portfolio, generally it's a lot of nudity, right? And that reminds
Yeah.
me, my last most previous boyfriend thought that I was like a closet lesbian because he was always looking over my shoulder at my computer. He's like, "Oh, you're looking at naked chicks again. Are you sure that you're straight?" And I'm like, "I'm looking at a photographer's portfolio to see who they worked with and to get references." I'm like,
Yes,
I don't care if
exactly.
there's boobs and vaginas everywhere. That doesn't faze me. Like, I'm
Yeah, like
going
I'm
to see
trying to
this.
make sure they're legitimate.
Yeah, I'm planning on going to this person's studio to get naked for them too, so I want to see what they're doing. Like it just some people it won't ever compute. They'll just see nudity and they can't. Like I guess you can't teach an old dog new tricks in some cases.
Yeah, like they're so on, well, if they're looking at that, that means they're into it.
Yeah. Where I guess I've said this before in the podcast, but I feel like I'm so deep into the forest I can't see the trees. Like all the other like nude photos around me, like my portfolio, my friends' portfolios, the photographers that I'm working with, I'm always immersed in it and it doesn't phase me at all. I'm super desensitized.
That is a great way of putting it. I'm so deep in the forest I can't even see the trees. Cause yeah, you just forget. You're like, oh yeah, that's right. People usually don't do that. Or like you're like, oh, surprise, forgot.
Yeah. Or if I have a friend or an acquaintance who like just got divorced and they're depressed and they need a hobby. Nowadays, my go-to solution for them is to suggest, why don't you get into photography and start joining some artistic nude meetups because that's fun and interesting. But it's because
Yeah.
I've interacted with so many recently divorced or about to get divorced photographers who are getting into nude photography.
Yeah, right. That's
Yeah.
funny. But it is, and you also meet, like, if that is your mindset, then you meet other people with that mindset who are for it. Like, that's so funny though. Yeah.
Yeah, I will note a disclaimer that 99% of people that I've suggested that to were not comfortable with the idea of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Not for everyone, but you never know also. I actually just worked with someone yesterday who it was her first like nude shoot, but she was comfortable with it. But it was something that she was just recently getting into photography and, trying to figure out what she was and wasn't into photographing.
Cool. It's always fun being somebody's first nude photo shoot because they're often like really nervous about the fact that you're naked in front of them.
Yeah. Right. And you're like, it's fine.
Yeah. Well, all right. We're about at time. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention on the podcast before we wrap it up?
Man, time goes by quick when you're having fun, that's for
I
sure.
know.
um, Nothing specific. Yeah, no, just super, super excited and grateful to have been able to do this. Like, I loved seeing when you said you were doing a podcast. I was like, that's exactly what this world needs. Just talking about it, bringing people together and discussing like what it's like for us. Because especially out here in Hawaii, when I tell people I model full time, they their first question is always, what, so how, so like, how, what, like they don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
They're just, because they have no frame of reference. They're like, I don't even know what to ask. Just like, how? Like, and so that's why I think this is really great because I think it's something people really like just have no idea about.
How tall are you, by the way?
I am 5'7", but I photograph like I'm 5'9", 5'10", because I can, like, I'm not short, obviously, but I meet people consistently and they're like, "Oh, I thought you were going to be taller." I'm like, "Nope." And then I get photos back from certain things and I'm like, "Holy shit, I look so tall." Like, no wonder people think I'm much taller. It's because I have a long torso, and so that just, that photograph's like extra tall.
And the reason I ask that is because I'm just under 5'2", and so when I tell people that I'm a freelance model, if they don't know me at all, I think they're just looking at me like, "What do you mean you're a model? You're not tall enough." Because
Yeah.
the cool idea is that you're supposed to be like 5'9" or taller if it's an agency or whatever.
Yeah, or like for runway, that they've only really ever thought about it in a runway capacity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exposing that you can be different like sizes and shapes for freelance modeling, especially for nude modeling. Like there's a
Oh
lot
yeah,
more like variety of different types of nude models.
absolutely. Which is fabulous because I love that, especially in the freelance world. Yeah, you can really be whatever you want because agencies, they are slowly but surely kind of changing their tune, but not really. So it's nice just being in charge of yourself and getting to, like, oh man, I tell people, they're like, "Why aren't you with an agency?" I'm like, "Because I don't want to be weighed.
Yeah.
Like, that's not healthy." And they're like, "Wait, they weigh you?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, people don't realize agencies, not all of them anymore, but you'd be surprised by how many big agencies still weigh their models.
Yeah.
And that just does not create healthy habits."
Yeah. Plus, if you were working with an agency, then you pretty much have to do whatever they say
Yes.
and your own creative thing.
Yeah, you don't get to say, "No, I don't want to do that photo shoot. I don't like it." Nope, they told you to do it. So that's what you got to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm all about the freelance life.
Yup.
Cool. Well, I'll include links to your Instagram and any other links that you want to include in the show notes for the podcast so people can check you out. And I look forward to seeing you sometime next week when I come to Hawaii.
Yes, I will see you soon. Thank you so much for having me on. And it's just so fabulous. Great.
Awesome. Great chatting with you, Bella.